Filippo, it's great to be here with you.
Hey Sam, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. I think maybe one way we could start this conversation is could you introduce yourself and say who you are?
My name is Filippo Conforti. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Commerce Layer, which is a composable commerce engine. I live in Italy. I founded this company in early 2017. And I'm in the e-commerce industry, have been in the e-commerce industry for more than 20 years now. I don't know, maybe if you like, I can tell you also how everything started.
Love to dive in there and to kind of introduce myself. I'm Sam Bhagwat, so I'm the co-founder of Gatsby. We recently joined Netlify, and so we're here kind of like talking about the idea of composable commerce and how it happened, the different pieces of the puzzle, and we're specifically Filippo and I are going to be talking a little bit about Commerce Layer, the story of Commerce Layer, and Filippo and Commerce Layer's journey in the space, as well as what they've seen from various different companies and folks who have been using their platform, as well as doing composable commerce in general. Let's kind of kick it off. So we'd love to get some of the backstory of how your sort of history of in the commerce world and how you sort of came to start Commerce Layer.
Yeah, as mentioned, I've been in this industry for more than 20 years. Before founding Commerce Layer, I used to be the e-commerce solution architect for Gucci, the Italian luxury brand, from 2011 to 2015. So more than 10 years ago.
And sounds like a cool job too.
Yeah, it was. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot. I met my co-founder there, so it was really a great experience. I would say that the idea of Commerce Layer was born during those years because my co-founder and I were experiences firsthand what it looks like to work with a monolithic platform, with a enterprise legacy platform. So we started thinking that there should have been a different way of building e-commerce. We didn't know, and we didn't talk about headless, composable, Jamstack, all these.
None of those terms were existed back then. We're all figuring it out.
And then, after a couple of years, I realized, that's what we had built, like a headless commerce engine. Someone told me, it's nice, the idea of building a headless commerce engine. Oh, headless, interesting. We were really focused on the problem that we were trying to solve, and this problem was, I'd say, first an organizational problem. In a company like Gucci, but many others, you have at least two departments: the marketing department, the creatives, the business users that are, they want to create beautiful experiences, want to innovate, and to create a unique website or a shop experience. On the other side, there is the engineering team that is responsible for the reliability, the security, the speed, performance, and the two requirements sometimes conflict because
yes, they do.
You don't want to touch your checkout. If it works, don't touch it. That was our mantra. Never release on Fridays. All these things that they were also creating some internal conflicts, because we were always saying no to the business, and that was a pain. So technically, we started thinking of a different way. Why don't we separate these two domains, the marketing, content, experience domain from the technology domain? And we decided to, in 2016, we decided to leave Gucci and to create this commerce API.
So without sort of going through every detail, though, I'm very interested in a lot of the details. What's changed from 2016, to now, 2023? in this world? Like, what's different now than before?
That's a good question. I would say that in 2016, monoliths were really, headless, composable was very, very early stage. We were like precursor. We were not the first. I remember Molten was already there. Commerce Tools was already there. So we were not the first platform, but really the monoliths were the way to go. The companies were looking to replatform from one monolith to the other. That could have been like Magento, Hybris, Demandware, now SAP Commerce Cloud, Adobe Commerce Cloud, SAP Commerce Cloud, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, all these platforms. So there was every 4 or 5 years, companies replatform from one monolith to the other. And it was always a very complex, expensive, time-consuming project, with a developer experience that was really bad.
And I think like to dive into that a little bit, like, can you share some stories of, some replatforming stories that you've seen? The horror stories from monolith to monolith.
No, it's not an horror story. I think you always learn from the experience, but for sure the replatforming of the Gucci.com from a homegrown Ruby on Rails website to a Hybris platform was quite complex. It was a 2 years project.
And can you walk through like what were some of the challenges during that like project?
The big challenge was we hired an agency, a design agency, one of the best, and the marketing team worked with the agency to create a beautiful design. And then the big challenge came when we had to implement that design into the monolithic platform, because the business users didn't think about the constraints of the platform for a reason. I mean, they shouldn't, Then we had to integrate this beautiful design to a platform that was completely different. They had Hybris had the accelerator. Let's say it's a starter. It's let's say a boilerplate application that you use as a starter, and there was such the gap between the starter and the experience that was designed by the agency was so big that integrating the two was really complex. And so
Can you walk through like some of the specific differences that you saw?
Well, if you think of any, let's say any starter, if you build a starter template, it is you get like a home page, some category pages, some product pages, and so on. Instead, the shopping experience that was designed by the agency, that was huge, by the way, the agency, not. The shopping experience was not that traditional. It was there was let's say a very immersive storytelling, and so you had pages with images, videos. You were watching a video, and you got like a buy link directly from the video, from the image itself, with an immersive experience. The storytelling and the immersive experience was at the center of the customer experience. And then the fact that this experience was shoppable was, secondary in some way. But we had to implement that, and doing that with like the product page template built with Java was.
And I think this is like such a fascinating thing, right? And I think the story that you just shared, is such an illustration of why we need composable commerce, which is that we need to create unique, distinct experiences that are narrative driven, that are experience as where like individual products have a story behind them, right? Rather than sort of like, where it kind of feels like, hey, well, this is kind of like Amazon, except it just has our stuff on it. And it's got more of like a generic feeling. And like that sort of that sort of gap is just so like between what kind of the monoliths often want to provide, which is and what we what like fashion forward brands or like fashion brands or sort of marketing and brand conscious companies in general want to create. There's just such a huge difference.
Yeah, indeed, it's very big. And it is so complex to customize those monoliths. And the problem also was that the decision makers were sold on the idea of buying one platform from one vendor with everything out of the box. This out of the box, I have heard that so many times, and nothing was really included in that box, nothing that you actually needed. So it was everything was a customization, customize. And so the approach was, you get the platform, you start customizing every piece, and then your platform is really something that is so different from the original platform. You can't, for example, you can't do any upgrades. Let's say a new upgrade, security upgrades is released. Your version is so different that if you upgrade, you break everything, and so you're really locked. You can't change your platform. You can't upgrade the security. You can't introduce new features, and this is so complex. So, as you said, the composable approach is a very realistic approach, where you say, okay, let's assume that no platform does what I need. And so instead of buying something that claims to do that, let's build some pieces. Let's take some pieces and compose what I need. It's a more realistic, much more realistic approach.
Yeah. And I think we as engineers are used to customizing, right? That's our job, is to sort of take these custom business requirements and get the software in line with what these requirements are. And so as engineers, we have this mindset of course, we should be able to sort of like grab the off-the-shelf components. But, as you mentioned, there can be that gap of how a business wants to buy things. How have you seen folks bridge that gap?
What I did was to create, the only way to make the design work with a monolithic platform was to create an API layer on top of that. That's what the only, we were discussing with the team, and we said, how can we implement that? There is no way. So the only thing was, okay, let's try to build some very, rough point-to-point APIs to implement that very design. It was not super, let's say, extensible, but we really wanted to, to hit the deadline. So we created APIs so that we could decouple the experience from the commerce.
You built
platform.
APIs inside your SAP Hybris instance.
Yes.
And then your lesson from that was, and then you used the APIs and built a different sort of application for Gucci.com.
Yes. So the API were the agency also had not just designer, also front-end developers, very good front-end developers. And with APIs, they could so they were like requesting APIs. We created some, for each feature, we had to create some contract, some API definition. So that was the contract. So they built they kept building like the features using the mocked API response. And in the meantime, we were building the actual API. And, piece by piece, we created all the components, let's say, all the pieces that they needed to do that. And so, I started thinking, wow, why couldn't we build a commerce API? So instead of taking a monolith and trying to, hack it with some APIs, why don't? And initially the idea was not to build a company, to leave Gucci. Really, the idea was, so nice, so great to build this. And so we started designing this idea, and modeling this idea. And then again, with my co-founder, at some point we said, why don't we make the big jump and try to build something real, And so that's what we did.
Yeah, and I love that story, because I think there are so many people that are listening to this that will empathize with having to hack together APIs or whatever within the monolith to sort of make what they want to make work, and the pain that involves, and the kind of constant feeling of like, why am I doing this? Can't I use better tools, right? Like, aren't my tools supposed to be working for me as opposed to against me? And so I love that I love that you were able to kind of like walk through that story and pain, because it might be from a story from 2014, 2015, but it feels like something that could have happened this year or last year, right? Like it.
Yeah. It's not when you ask the question what's different between 2016 to today, my first response would be nothing in
Maybe
some
not
cases,
that much. Except that now we have a better way of doing it. So the next developer does not have to go through what Filippo circa 2014 and 2015 went through. Hopefully they can find a great composable tools, and they can like escape the pain of the monolith. And so let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about today. So like I'd love to hear some stories that you've seen or you've watched of companies going through this transformation process. There may be a couple examples that like stand out to you, and can you just tell us about like what that was like?
Let me tell you, give you about a couple of examples of our clients. One is one of my favorite brands, Chili's bottles. I have one here. It's not.
Hey,
I show you.
Yeah, bring it up on the screen.
Yeah, it is also branded with my initials.
That's great.
So yeah, they were already the agency Rotate. They are a UK-based brand. They are one of the fastest growing brands. Rotate they were a precursors. They are an agency, a London-based agency. They are like precursors. They were precursors of headless and composable. They had started the journey a while ago. And when they reach out to us, they had a stack built with Data CMS as the CMS. They had 5 Shopify instances to power like the checkout for 5 different markets. They had a Next.js website, and beautiful site. If you look at the site now, it's really beautiful. And so their challenge was to do the next step. So they were already in the composable commerce journey. So they didn't need to replatform everything. They just to have the next iteration, and the next iteration was to replace the commerce engine, because maintaining 5 Shopify instances for 5 markets from a cost perspective, infrastructure perspective, was not the thing, and especially since their plans were to scale to 30 markets. So they replaced the Shopify instances with 1 commerce layer instance and scale to 30 more markets, and keeping the very same experience. They kept the very same experience, and they also saw an increase in conversion rate because the checkout was a headless checkout, a Jamstack checkout. It was much better. But if you remember, also when we as developers were like, the promise of changing the front end without changing the back end has been around for a while. Like with the MVC model view controller, you keep the model and the controller and you change the view. Never happens because
you always end up with the coupling somehow. It always sneaks back in.
You're in a rush and okay, let's put this logic on the front end. Nobody will notice. So the beauty of the best parts of headless is that you have to decouple. You can't like put the logic, more or less. So that was the first time that I'm in my entire career that I've seen that happen. So change the back end without changing the front end. That was the very first time in my career, and now it's becoming the new normal. I give you some other examples of larger companies that have done this transformation, are doing this transformation. But another company another of our clients is SumUp. They, I believe you are familiar with their card readers. They're selling those card readers worldwide with Commerce Layer, and they did a very data-driven. They followed a very data-driven approach because they started. They had already a composable platform. They wanted to bring the commerce component to the next level. So they, we started working together, and they started introducing commerce layer, like A/B testing commerce layer with their existing checkout. So they started with one country, and with an A/B testing mechanism, they started sending 80% of the traffic and the orders to their current checkout and 20% to commerce layer, measuring the results and measuring that commerce layer. The commerce layer part had actually a better conversion. So moving forward to 50-50, then 100, then 2 countries, 3 countries, 4 countries, 30, 40 countries.
Yeah. This is fascinating, because like what you're essentially describing is you're describing modern, essentially a version of modern development practices. Red black deploys, split, like being able to like route traffic in the sort of the right way with like feature flagging essentially, and like, oh well, 5% of our traffic is this way, but 95% of our traffic is that way, and then being able to kind of just test it and see how it goes and kind of like change. But that requires a certain amount of decoupling to make it work. You can't swap out the whole thing. You're just swapping out the checkout, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear. So the other thing I sort of like, the other it's sort of interesting takeaway I'm getting from those two stories is kind of the checkout experience, right? We see this a lot with folks that are building headless for Shopify sites, which is that they're like they can decouple the storefront, and so the storefront is a modern Next site or a modern Gatsby site or a modern Next site. But then as soon as someone adds the items to the cart and clicks checkout, they have to go to like checkout.domain.com, which is a hosted sort of Shopify site. So it's kind of nearly headless, nearly headless Nick from Harry Potter. The head is kind of off, but maybe kind of swings on or whatever it may be, because then you have kind of a very standard checkout flow, which might be fine for many brands too, right? But like maybe, but a lot of brands want to kind of try to customize it, want to optimize it, want to see, well, if we do this, if we do that, if we do the other thing, can we, increase conversion, because there's a huge ROI from optimizing that stage of the funnel. If you can reduce cart abandons, like that is the last stage of intent. So instead of trying to save 300 people or 200 people or 100 people early in the funnel, maybe you just have to save 5 or 10 from like abandoning their cart right before they're about to purchase it. And so you get sort of like a high impact from kind of like low effort type work. So fascinating to hear that that's how folks, that's a couple of ways that folks have used Commerce Layer.
Yeah, I that's a very good point. Every time, also, at the Gemstack conferences, at the Headless Commerce Summit, headless, we talk about headless commerce, but actually what we're talking about is headless content, because then, so it's, you decouple the front end from the back end, you get a headless CMS, use a modern framework, and build a website, and then checkout, car checkout, and the commerce part is the same as before. It's like out of scope, and this is actually a very important part, as you said. And by the way, we just published, our chief customer officer just published an article on our website of how to on the importance of improving and iterating on your checkout, because it's arguably is one of the most important components of your e-commerce website, and it is great to have
and it's like I agree 100%, and we often talk about performance for the same reason. It's like this is kind of the thing that if you optimize it will have disproportionate results to the other things that you might want to do, your long backlog of like tasks on the queue. And it's like, well, okay, but if we improve performance by this, it's going to have a direct result. And like, again, very similar for kind of the checkout experience.
Yeah. I also understand how convenient it is, like to have just a hosted checkout and send traffic, and send the customers to the hosted checkout. We at Commerce Layer, we have a hybrid approach, or let's say a progressive approach, because we have a hosted checkout application, so you can use it like you do with Shopify. You link it, you customize like the logo, and you have add some small customizations, and you're good to go. But our checkout is also open source, and so you can fork it, you can host on Netlify, and you can customize, add your customizations, or if you want, you can just take it as a reference and build your own, design your own pixel perfect checkout application. There is no way a brand like Gucci or would take the commerce layer hosted checkout or the Shopify hosted checkout, or no way. I mean, the larger enterprise brands, they do want to design the checkout and iterate on checkout to optimize conversion, measure, iterate, and optimize conversions. Because as you said, a small increase in conversion rate, if your volumes are large, it means a lot, much more than, some other types of customizations.
Yeah, I also think about it from like a retail perspective and a branding perspective. If you're Gucci, you want to carefully control your the experience of what it is to walk into a Gucci store. And if you're Gucci, if your Gucci items are in a non-Gucci store, you want to carefully control how they're displayed on the shelves, and you have like a long list of guidelines for retailers and so on and so forth, right? I think a lot of folks coming from like the developer world or the web world, haven't, they're just not maybe as familiar with the merchandising world and all the kind of various aspects of the merchandising world. But that stuff is so tightly controlled. And so, of course, why wouldn't you want to have the same level of control that you have over the in-person shopping experience over the online shopping experience? Because again, that's what a luxury brand, that's what a fashion brand really wants, is to, a lot of what you are is that experience, and you've got to communicate that.
Yeah, I remember when I joined Gucci in 2011, the website was a website with an horizontal scrolling, and it was like mirroring the shelves of the store. Just not the most modern approach, but yeah, that is entirely true. The goal was to recreate.
That's fascinating. I see what they were trying to do, right? Like whether or not it worked in the web medium, but like they were trying to recreate the store experience. So that's fascinating.
It was a bit complex on mobile, but anyway,
So such a cool story, yeah. And then maybe that's a good place to sort of like talk about like what types of industries do you see? Actually, maybe before we get into the industry, so you wrote a piece called "Content is Not Commerce" that sort of expands on some of these themes, right? Of optimizing kind of like the difference between headless commerce and headless content.
Yeah, that's a very important topic in my opinion, because very often we consider, or people consider, the product catalog as a different type of content. Like, there is the product catalog and then there is the editorial content. I believe that this separation comes from, let's say, the history, because when the first e-commerce platforms were created, e-commerce CMSs, were created in the early 2000s, the requirement was to publish a catalog online. And so you had this platform, this e-commerce CMS, or CMS with e-commerce capabilities, that you use to create some content, product content, and add prices, availability, payment, checkout, and so on. Then at some point, someone wanted a better content experience, and so developers started pairing WordPress with Magento, for example, and so you had the CMS and the e-commerce platform. Actually, at the beginning, or maybe also today, there are many of those sites, like with the www.brand.com and store.brand.com, because one is managed with the e-commerce platform, the other with the CMS. And then, I believe this is, I consider this as the very first version of composable commerce. Not the best experience, but if you think about that, adding a CMS with a different subdomain, or the other way around, having an e-commerce engine with a shop subdomain, isn't it a composable commerce?
What you're arguing is that we're already living in a composable world with many different CMSs, sure. But people just don't realize that, and they sort of treat, Now
we just have APIs, we have great tools to do that in a much better way. But composable commerce was already here in 20 years ago. That's what I think. And
docs.domain.com, blog.domain.com,
this is
domain.com,
composable.
shop. So we were already composable. We just didn't realize it.
Well, because you want to use a CMS for content, an e-commerce platform for commerce, and a blog engine for blog. I mean, this is the best of breed. But to your question, so now that we have better tools, we have APIs, but still people think that the product catalog should live in the e-commerce platform because this is how we got here, from CMS and e-commerce platform. And then in the article that I published I explained that. I just looking at the solutions that other CMSs or platforms are using. You synchronize product catalog from the e-commerce CMS from the e-commerce platform to the CMS, and you keep this synchronization happening so that and the content editors have to log in the e-commerce platform to manage the product catalog. Then they go to the CMS and they find their product content synchronized. Why don't they just work on the CMS instead of going back to the e-commerce platform? So why don't you bring your product catalog to the CMS and you manage all content there? Your catalog with categories, products, variants, editorial content, any attributes. And so this is content, in my opinion, including the catalog. And the commerce part is about prices, availability of products, shopping cart, checkout, my account, order management. This is the transactional component of commerce. And you can build any experience if you don't have any constraints from the e-commerce platform. You can take a headless CMS, which also provides you with a flexible schema. You can model your content the way you need. I wish I had something like this when I was in Gucci. Design that came from the agency, we could have taken like the headless CMS, created a content model to support that experience, and very easy. And then with an API like Commerce Layer to provide the prices, the availability, the cart. It's like the Snipcart approach. I think what Snipcart did for small clients. I don't think Snipcart was an enterprise grade commerce solution, but the idea was very smart. It's very smart, and I think that injecting the prices or injecting a card from the client side really gives the content editors and developers to build an experience. And so, again, separating content from commerce really allows you to make your marketers and your business people and your creatives happy, and at the same time, your engineering team, the commerce team, to be safely with in managing the APIs and managing the infrastructure, security, payments, and so on.
Yeah, what you're essentially, the point you're essentially making is about separation of concerns and making sure that the right people have access to edit the right parts of data in the right systems, yes. Which I think is an underutilized or underdiscussed kind of part of the story. So I've done talks where I'll kind of draw the architecture diagram of a headless a commerce setup, for example, where you see like the e-commerce system, and what I try to do is I just try to draw circles for all the different systems, and then lines kind of connecting it. So or kind of concerns, right? And so that might be your CMS, your framework, your Jamstack host, your e-commerce system, and then maybe there are some other sort of concerns like performance and content preview and so on and so forth. And once you start like drawing the lines, you kind of realize that like, oh, okay, these are the integrations that I need to have, and I also need to think about which integrations are one way, which integrations are two way, which systems are pushing where, because ultimately like you want to sort of like central, you want to think through that the experience of the content editors, and you don't want them to like do you want to give your content editors access to your like e-commerce platform? Like what if they accidentally like change prices or something? They're not really sure what they're doing, like because they're they're not specialists in the system, and instead like, okay, well maybe we control the certain aspects here, and then we control maybe there's a separate team that lives in that e-commerce system that's working on all the other parts of the puzzle?
Yeah, ultimately, I think that composable commerce is about identifying the domains: content, commerce, search, delivery, personalization, payments. And from a, let's say, platform perspective, from a tooling perspective, is to give access to the different teams. Each team should work with one tool. And again, if you split your content, your e-commerce content, the editorial content in the CMS, the product content in the e-commerce platform, the content editor has to access two different platforms. And as you said,
I'm thinking about making that a slogan, by the way, and putting it on the wall or something. Like, each team should access one system, like that should be the source of truth. The CMS should be the source of truth for the content team. For the merchandising team, it's, the inventory management in the e-commerce, right? Like each, but your team should know what the source of truth is and which system is the source of truth.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that. We'll have to. Yeah, maybe we can make like joint Netlify commerce layer like stickers and like give them out at like next Jamstack conference.
Speaking of stickers, I never told you that I stole one idea of. I think it was at the first Jamstack conference. You had some stickers that was a sticker that was like, my website is faster than yours.
Yes.
Do you remember that? And
it's on the back of my computer.
We created one that is, our checkout converts better than yours. Sorry.
I love it.
Yeah, sorry, I never told you that, we had just, let's say, stolen your idea.
What is it like? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Anyway, I have both, so I have
it's the sincerest form. It's a sincerest form of flattery. We take it as nothing but compliments.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're sort of like wrapping up the conversation. But what kind of guidance would you give to somebody that is maybe at an early stage in this process, where they're kind of thinking about a replatform and kind of wondering if they're going to just do the same thing, or just not really sure how to go forward, and feeling like they're kind of stuck in a little bit of a mess with their commerce experience?
Well, I'd say don't be scared too much, because sometimes I hear a lot of concerns, about the fact that composable is complex, headless is complex. Everyone understands the benefits, the performance improvement, the flexibility, scalability. But I hear more and more than, headless commerce or composable commerce is complex. It is not that complex, actually. If you are a developer who feels comfortable in working with APIs, modern framework like React, Vue, Svelte, you will feel at home, and building with these tools will really be funny instead of complex. So I'd say just start. Don't overcomplicate the stack. Don't think of where you will need to support millions of orders, because if you're just starting, just build something small. Let's say and learn. I think it's a process, both from merchants that are already doing million of orders, and they are migrating from a monolith to a composable stack. It's a progressive decoupling journey. You want to go step by step, iterate, and learn. And if you are starting, if you are a developer who's starting approaching
and how do they do that, by the way? Like, is it like they launch maybe a microsite on Commerce Layer to kind of see how it goes, or like what do you see them doing?
Oh, well, first, Commerce Layer can be integrated directly on the client side. And potentially you could do that with Google Tag Manager if you want to do a POC. So you really we also provide a library of micro front ends, like standard web components that you can inject on the client side. The price web component, the add to cart web component, the cart web component, and so on. So if you're on a monolith, you can identify, let's say, one domain of your business can be one country, maybe the country, the less risky country. Maybe you want to start with one that is not your primary market, and maybe you want to start only with guest customers. Generally you identify a subdomain, you introduce commerce layer. If you want, you can also A/B test and progress from that, and then and you can keep iterating on that, and then there are some components that you want to swap. There is I don't know if you are familiar with the Strangler pattern, which I think it was coined by ThoughtWorks in 2016, if I'm not wrong. And the Strangler pattern is a pattern. If you Google, you will find a lot of diagrams. So you start from a monolith, and you start slicing the monolith piece by piece, replacing each feature or adding new features as microservices or micro front ends. And so you slowly strangle the monolith until the monolith dies or becomes another micro front end. It comes from I don't remember exactly the story, but there is like some trees that in the branches they grow this in Australia, I believe they grow these branches that then strangle the tree. I mean, it's not a beautiful image. Headless, strangler. We could do better with this terminology. But
we can blame ThoughtWorks for coining the term or whatever. But I think that's like valuable guidance to teams migrating. I've participated in similar kinds of migrations of an app, sort of step by step from Backbone to React, kind of in pre-Gatsby days. But take one concern at a time, right? And kind of like move it over. And if you're just figuring out whether you want to do it at all, take your smallest geo, maybe like take a part of that site and then like just move that part over, A/B test it, and then kind of like make incremental decisions from there. So really like kind of the precision and targeting. I think this is it's great to hear. It's great to hear like different folks like guiding people through like a low risk approach, because ultimately with enterprises that's the challenge. It's not about do you want to change. It's like, yes, we want to change. It's just we don't necessarily believe change is possible, right? And that can be the tricky part.
Low risk and hard ROI or immediate ROI. You don't want to build a 2 years project and hope that in 2 years you will have a beautiful stack. Let's start improving your sales right now. Introducing small improvements, measuring the data, and just improve your sales today, piece by piece, not in 2 years from now. It's not another replatforming, because what I think what is scary is that people have experience now. In the past 20 years, they have done some replatforming projects. And if replatforming from one monolith to another monolith is complex, they could think, what is it to replatform from one monolith to 4 or 5 components? If you do that all at once, I understand it can be complex, risky, and scary. But if you start adding just one of those components to your existing monolith, one by one, piece by piece, you never do another replatforming, and then you strangle your monolith and slowly.
No more replatform. Never replatform again. I'm seeing the stickers churning out from our sticker factory, Filippo.
We can launch another startup of stickers, I think.
Yeah. We'll just be coining phrases and like churning them out, and like that's great, right? I think that like this is kind of the approach that we need to be taking to guide folks through the process. And for those who are listening, thanks for kind of like taking the time and taking the time here with us to kind of hang out on this somewhere in between, California and Italy, somewhere between the past and the future, somewhere between the stack we have now and the stack that we want to have in the future, along this like incremental journey of change and progression, from good to better to hopefully best. So it's great to be here with Filippo. Glad we could do this, and thanks everybody that's joined us today.
Thank you for having me, Sam. It's been a great pleasure.
It was.